can smell your blood from all the way down there. What do you suppose that feels like? Huh? Torn apart? Eaten alive?
Ben Studios have been around since PlayStation's origins, from Bubsy to Gabe Logan, Nathan Drake to Deacon St. John. Their most impressive, gritty and successful game in 2019's Days Gone sold close to 10 million copies, and they have earned their classic label and then some, which in modern gaming can only mean one thing: remastered, baby.
Thank you.
No, you said...
Now this remaster comes in two forms: an updated £10 or $1 upgrade for PS4 owners of the original, or a full PS5 £45 digital pack. PC owners can access the new game modes and other extras in the Broken Road DLC, but all PC owners get the same visual boosts, including DualSense supports, offered in the PlayStation 5 Remaster for free. But what are they, I hear you ask? Well, thanks to PlayStation UK sending me code, I'm able to cover that. So we get two new modes in this PS5 Remaster: Performance or Quality, and a third Enhanced mode for PS5 Pro players that uses Sony's own machine learning upscaler in PSSR. The base game was upgraded at launch on the PS5 to 60 FPS and remains a free option. It runs PS4 Pro code, which was close to then maximum PC settings, using checkerboard 4K resolution. Now, aside from frame rate doubling, this is just PS4 Pro code running in back compat mode, and it ran well, as my deep PS4 review coverage reflected. Aside the Horde mode, which can see it dip using that same PS4 code, and latest patch, we can see dense views, hundreds of frantic zombies, foliage, explosions, and physics can cause brief drop frames, be it when spawning an explosion, calculating the force, physics, etc, but it's mostly GPU bound on the PS5 in its backwards compatibility mode, although I suspect it can at times be CPU or memory limited, but PC allows me to validate that later. Now, right off the bat, the remaster performs better than the already excellent BC version, with visual upgrades and some reductions. PlayStation 5 BC version ran at 60 FPS, which has no modes, versus the remaster performance mode at 60 FPS. Also, we do see a softer image than that 4K checkerboard mode. Now, the checkerboard image is sharper, crisper, and it presents more detail and clarity of textures over the new 1440p 60 FPS performance mode, highlighting what I've always said. The PS4 Pro checkerboard was an excellent solution that often got close to a 4K resolve in many titles for much less cost and memory footprint. In fact, you can see it here compared to the 4K native TAA version on PC and even the 4K native quality mode on the PS5. Now, like many games, LOD is related to resolution, so we can have slightly more grass, trees and bushes in that PS4 Pro mode over the new 1440p PS5 Performance mode, as it targets a 4K output using interleave pixels with every odd and even frame. Now, although this is almost invisible in play, and it does come with other gains, e.g. checkerboard does struggle more with flicker on foliage and edge shifting. See here on the shipping container and shrubs, the performance mode is softer but more stable, and all other modes are even better. Quality mode is sharper and does exceed the level of details of foliage over both these modes now, identical to the new highest 4K PC settings. Now, in the PS5 Pro, it does go higher in those same modes, but the enhanced mode uses PSSR at a 1584p base and then reconstructs that back to 4K, which I must commend the team on, stating what each mode and console runs at. No DRS noted or found in my counts, and this has image quality closer to the 4K quality mode but lower LOD due to the base resolution being lower. Performance mode on Pro is 1800p, but IQ is softer as our textures and details are slightly worse than quality mode, but the level of detail is closer to maximum than both Pro's enhanced mode and PS5's performance mode. And finally, the PS5 Pro quality mode runs above 4K at 5K or 5120 by 2880p, and as such has level of detail and clarity that exceeds all others, including the 4K Max TAA PC mode. Although if your PC can take it, you can go higher, which is patched with the same visual updates and changes noted next. Now, all modes in this update do increase object level of detail, higher LOD levels at distance. Now, this can be seen in side-by-sides often, even in cutscenes, such as these sandbags, which have a far higher triangle count than the previous BC mode and the lower settings on PC. Now, result is the new mode has less pop-in and geo-swaps than the old code. And effectively, the PS5 in its quality mode and the PS5 Pro in its enhanced mode upwards does tend to run everything at the exact same settings as the highest settings now on PC. And although minor, like the resolution change, it can be hard to spot in play. In cutscenes, you can see better detail, foliage, textures and shadows than the PS4 BC code, but the lighting and tone mapping changes are the most obvious. The old game had more earthy greens, browns and light blues. The remaster is much darker by default, which helps the nighttime and dark sections out in the middle of the wilderness being chased by zombies as a George Romero horror story unfolds before you, but also bathed with a colder blue hue in most scenes that can be stark in some comparisons, as here. Fog volumes and foliage look very similar, but the remaster looks more like the cool settings on your TV. The team have stated on their blog the lighting of sun and moon has also been updated, with global illumination of the screen space variety added in, and double shadow map resolution and improved ambient occlusion and atmospheric scattering. In reality though, even in side-by-sides, the biggest updates are more fog and a change in tone mapping and subtle increased grass and shrubs. We also get an FOV slider now, with the PS4 code being closest to 77 degrees, but the remaster defaults at 70. All my tests are with it matched at 77 to ensure as close to like for like as possible, so ensure if you are comparing you bump it up to 77 as it defaults lower than the old BC code. And that takes us to the performance comparisons between the PS5 and PC.
And I already know it's a bad idea.
You just ride on through. You pull as many of them off as you can. And I go in through the back, down that hill, find the garage.
Shit.
All right, you just give me a few minutes to find the part that I need. You ride back, we ride the hell out. After I kill a few of the bastards.
Swear to God, you got a death wish.
Like I said,
Not tonight.
Run, you stinking sons of bitches!
So again, looking at the PS4 Pro code running on PS5, it's generally a locked 60 FPS, both in the single player and the horde mode. It can randomly drop frames at certain points, and you see this on PC, which can be sudden stutters that happen on my RX6800, which is generally similar below the PS5 Pro settings. And you can see here on the PS5, even in the BC mode, it can randomly drop frames at certain points in the map. I don't know whether this is to do with frustum culling of objects, it's to do with streaming data in, it's to do with handling the zombies, explosions, I don't know. But it's definitely not GPU or just general performance related, it's just random stutters. What you do see is these drop frames when you're blowing barrels up, explosions, and this tends to be spawning in the explosion, physics based, all the calculations on the zombies being hit, killed, the point scoring, all of that is probably memory and CPU related, because we see exactly the same issue on more powerful PC hardware, the RX6800 GPU. Now overall, the BC mode is a pretty smooth locked 60 FPS, and even the bigger sections, even though it can dip to the low 50s at worst points as you see here, it's generally close enough to 60 to not be that offensive throughout play, and I've finished the game completely in the BC mode on PS5 and never had any major issues. Now the PS5 Remastered mode, the quality mode, is absolutely the clearest and sharpest way to play, but it is currently still only a 30 FPS title. They have promised a 120Hz 40 FPS mode and VRR support, but neither of those are ready at the time of this review, so it's probably going to come in a later patch. Now running the 60 FPS mode, it's fully locked, again aside those one or two drop frames randomly that still appear, because it's fundamentally the same core code underneath. Without these improvements, it's not a rewrite, it's certainly not a remaster in terms of going back and remaking the entire game like we saw with Last of Us Part 1 in terms of the remake from the original PS3, PS4 title. This is not at that level. So the PS5 BC mode in 60 FPS is good. The PS5 Remastered mode in 60 FPS is better, albeit with a slightly softer image and therefore slightly lower LOD at certain points, but better shadows and slightly better LOD on certain areas of the title in terms of the level of detail of objects. Overall, it washes its face. You're getting a very similar level of output, but People keep talking about this as a singular thing. I've seen it on the internet. The game has two modes. It has a quality mode and an enhanced mode. The quality mode is the one that you want for a better resolution than the current PS4 BC mode and improved image quality, albeit at 30, although the 40 FPS mode would improve it. And again, it's the situation now where we're just pushing games out and saying we'll promise things later. Not a fan of it. I do wish it had been launched with that 40 FPS and VRR mode. But the quality mode still looks very sharp and clean and as good as the best on PC, and the PS5 in its performance mode performs better than the PS5 in its BC mode. So it really does what it says on the tin. Now the PS5 Pro, really, there's not a lot to talk about. Running it on all the modes, it's a capped 30 again and it's locked. The enhanced mode is a locked 60 FPS. It's smooth as butter, apart from these singular drop frames. Again, when you're blowing explosions up and hitting tanks, you can get, I think, around 60 to 70 millisecond spikes. That's all I've ever seen throughout all my tests of the game in the PS5 Pro, both in its performance mode at 1800p and its enhanced mode with PSSR. The image quality is better in the enhanced mode. It does still have some flickering and dithering and slightly more ghosting than the TAA mode on all of the versions, but it is a better image quality than the performance mode. So really, there's not a lot between the two. I would recommend either or. They're both pretty much a smooth locked 60 FPS, and it really shows you why they haven't ran the 4K performance mode on the PS5 Pro. Here, using my RX6800, like I say, very similar levels of performance to the PS5 Pro, and at 4K native TAA, it cannot hold a locked 60 FPS in these sections. In side by side, you can see it can dip down to the low 50s again, very similar to what we saw in the BC mode on PS5, and that is exactly why they've capped it at 1800p. That 30% gives it enough headroom. Now, had the game had DRS, and again, it shows you how much effort has been put into rewriting the game and the time it would take to balance all that out with all the other work in the engine. It's not a small feat just to turn on DRS if your engine isn't going to support it. You haven't designed your assets around it, your TAA, your alpha effects. There's lots of things that will affect the fact you can't just turn DRS on. And that's the reason why the quick fix is to say, look, let's take 30% off the headroom of the GPU, and that constantly keeps it below that threshold, and therefore you never see any issues where it drops below 60 FPS. And here on my 5600X, it's never CPU bound. Certainly up to 60 FPS and above. I can get to 80, 90, 100 FPS on this particular machine. The CPU was never the bottleneck. Now that said, it is limited by one thread main. There's one main worker thread. It does multi-thread across multiple cores, but there is one worker thread that constantly hops around within Windows on multiple threads, and that can get close to limit 80, 90% I've seen at the highest point, but I'm circa 90, 100 FPS at that point. We don't get anywhere near those performance levels on the PS5 Pro at the moment, although I will be back once they release that 40 FPS VR mode, and I'll be covering that in depth. One final piece, loading. Is a minor boost again, but again highlights the minimal amount of work and changes made to the source code underneath. Around 5 seconds faster than the BC mode, at almost 30 seconds, it's not able to leap up without any major data handling changes, which is nice, but again, very minor. And that's it. It's a £10 or $10 remaster of the original title. I think it's a good update overall. Some of the changes in terms of the darkness I like. The tone mapping, I think it's a bit too extreme. Generally, there isn't a huge difference in the image quality. The tone mapping is the one thing you'll notice the most. It does make a strong impact to some sections, certainly the night sections and early morning and the dynamic rain and weather. It can look a bit too blue for my liking. I would have liked an option to actually have an adjuster to choose different settings of that tone mapping, or potentially go back to the original BC mode and just flip between the two. Just have that classic mode, you might want to call it, in terms of the image and tone mapping. Overall, though, it's a nice little boost, and it reinvigorates a title that has sold very, very well, did not get the love it deserved, delivered an exceptional high level of quality from Bend in Unreal Engine 4 and on the PS4 and the PS4 Pro, and here we have a slightly more native PS5 version that does a lot more for it, and PC players get a chance to jump into those new extra modes, full DualSense support, and overall it's a nice little enhancement just to bolster people that haven't played the game. £45 for the game now if you buy the brand new one. Probably a little bit too steep in my opinion, but again, I'm not calling the shots here, Sony are. I would have ran it probably around $30 or £25. That would have made it far more cost effective, but $10 if you have the old PS4 version, or if you're pretty savvy, just go and buy a disc version, stick it in your machine, and then you get the $10 upgrade from that anyway. Either or, it's still a nice little treat for everyone that hasn't played this game, and if you have played this game, then probably a good reason to dive back in and finish it all over again. Hit the broken road and see what happens. Anyway, remember, I am self-funded and completely independent, and I do all this as a side project in terms of all my very busy days of work and my full-time job, and obviously working over on IGN. Now, this was up early for my patrons, and if you like this or any of the content, you can support me by jumping on my Patreon, getting exclusive access, early access, and even dictating the kind of content that I cover, and getting your questions over to me on my database videos. But that's it, I'm out. Please like, share, support, and comment down below, and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. And if you can, join that Patreon because it really helps me immensely. You can read more over on my website, but for now, I'm out, and I'll catch you on the broken road ahead.